My parents signed me up as a voluntary donor for my brother's surgery, without asking, calling it family duty. I didn't just refuse, I moved across the country and blocked them. Now they're begging for a match while I'm living my best life under a new name. Hey Reddit, buckle up because this is going to be a long one, and I promise you it's worth every word. This is the story of how I went from being my family's invisible ATM and spare parts depot to living my absolute best life 3,000 miles away with a new name and zero regrets. And yes, my parents are currently losing their minds trying to find me, but we'll get there. So I, 28M, grew up as the oldest of two sons in what I can only describe as the most lopsided family dynamic you could imagine. My younger brother Bryce, 25 minutes, has been the golden child since the day he was born. I'm not exaggerating when I say that my entire childhood felt like being a background extra in The Bryce Show, where every episode featured my parents fawning over their precious miracle baby, while I stood in the corner holding the boom mic nobody asked me to hold. Let me paint you a picture of what life was like growing up in our house. When I was 8 and Bryce was 5, I won first place in the regional spelling bee. I was so excited to tell my parents. I ran home with my little trophy, burst through the front door, and found my mom on the phone with my grandmother, gushing about how Bryce had learned to tie his shoes that day. At 5, when I tried to show her my trophy, she waved me off and mouthed, "That's nice," before going back to her conversation about Bryce's monumental achievement of basic motor skills. That pretty much set the tone for the next 2 decades. Bryce was born with a congenital kidney condition that required monitoring throughout his childhood. I get it, that's stressful for any parent, but somewhere along the line, monitoring a medical condition turned into treating Bryce like he's made of glass while completely ignoring the other kid. Every family vacation was planned around what Bryce could handle. Every holiday was about making sure Bryce was comfortable. Every single dinner conversation somehow circled back to Bryce's latest doctor appointment, Bryce's special diet, Bryce's need for extra rest. Meanwhile, I was over here getting straight A's, making the varsity basketball team as a sophomore, and generally being the kind of kid any normal parent would be proud of. My reward? A half-hearted good job, and then right back to discussing whether Bryce's latest blood work showed improvement. The double standards in our house were so blatant they would make a reality TV producer jealous. When I was 12, I wanted to join the school band. My parents told me it was too expensive because of Bryce's medical bills. 3 months later, Bryce mentioned he thought video games were cool, and my dad came home with a brand new gaming console and 5 games. Cost probably 3 times what a used clarinet would have run them. But sure, we needed to watch our spending. When I turned 13, I asked if I could go to summer camp with my friend Derek. 2 weeks in the mountains, learning archery and canoeing. I had been looking forward to it for months. My parents said no. Too expensive. Too far away. What if something happened with Bryce, and they needed to focus on him? Derek went without me. He came back with stories about campfires and zip lines and his first kiss with a girl from another cabin. I spent that summer mowing lawns in our neighborhood for pocket money, while Bryce played his new video games in the air conditioning. When I was 14, I made the honor roll every quarter. My school held a ceremony for honor roll students at the end of the year. Parents were invited. Mine didn't come. They had a scheduling conflict, which turned out to be taking Bryce to a movie. I stood on that stage with all the other honor roll kids while their parents took pictures and cheered. Nobody was there for me. When I turned 15, I asked for driving lessons. My mom said they didn't have time with all of Bryce's appointments. I ended up learning to drive from Derek's dad, who felt bad for me and taught me on weekends. My parents never noticed, never thanked him, but they found plenty of time to teach Bryce when his turn came. Dad spent weeks with him, patient and encouraging. Mom made a whole photo album of Bryce getting his permit, then his license. They threw him a small party to celebrate. I got nothing for mine, not even a card. When I was 16, I asked my parents if they could come to my championship basketball game. It was a big deal. We were playing our rival school, and I was starting point guard. My dad said they'd try to make it, but Bryce had a follow-up appointment that afternoon, and they didn't want to rush him. The appointment was a routine checkup, not an emergency, not a procedure. A 15-minute conversation with a doctor they'd been seeing for years. They didn't come to my game. We won. I scored 18 points. I found out later that after Bryce's appointment, they took him to get ice cream because he'd been such a trooper about getting his blood drawn. Kid got ice cream for a blood test. I got nothing for leading my team to a championship victory. I came home to an empty house and leftover casserole in the fridge with a sticky note that said, "Heat for 3 minutes." Senior year, I applied to colleges on my own, filled out every application, wrote every essay, researched every scholarship opportunity. My parents didn't help, didn't ask, didn't seem to care where I ended up. When I got accepted to my top choice with a partial scholarship, I told them at dinner. My mom said, "That's wonderful, honey," without looking up from cutting Bryce's steak into smaller pieces because he wasn't feeling well. He was 17 years old. She was cutting his steak. By the time I graduated high school, I had learned to expect absolutely nothing from my parents. Bryce got a massive graduation party when his time came, with catered food and a DJ and like 50 people. Family flew in from 3 states. There were banners and balloons and a slideshow of his life. Mine? A card with $100 in it and a "we're proud of you" that sounded about as genuine as a $3 bill. We had dinner at a chain restaurant, just the 4 of us, and my parents spent most of the meal talking about Bryce's upcoming college plans. I put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs while my parents paid Bryce's full tuition at a private university because he needed the extra support. I worked 25 hours a week at a campus computer lab on top of a full course load. I ate ramen more nights than I care to remember. I tutored other students for extra cash. I sold my plasma twice a month because the clinic near campus paid $50 a pop. Meanwhile, Bryce lived in a nice dorm, had a meal plan fully paid, and got a new laptop every year. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in software engineering. Bryce graduated with a 2.3 GPA in communications after taking 5 years to finish because he changed his major twice and failed a few classes along the way. And guess who got the bigger celebration? Bryce got a week-long vacation to Cancun as a graduation gift, all expenses paid. I got a text message that said, "Congrats! Knew you could do it!" No party, no trip, no dinner, a text message. But here's the thing. Despite everything, I never really held it against Bryce personally. He didn't ask to be born with a kidney condition. He didn't ask our parents to treat him like a deity while treating me like furniture. That was on them. Bryce and I weren't close, but we weren't enemies either. We just existed in parallel, him in the spotlight and me in the shadows. After college, I moved to Seattle and started building my career as a software developer. I was good at it, really good. All those years of being overlooked had given me a chip on my shoulder the size of Montana, and I channeled every bit of that into my work. I stayed late. I took on extra projects. I learned new programming languages on my own time. I made myself indispensable. Within 5 years, I had worked my way up to a senior position at a major tech company. I bought my own condo with a view of the water. I had a reliable car that I paid for myself. I had savings in the bank and investments growing. I built a life that had absolutely nothing to do with my family, and it felt good. I kept minimal contact with my parents. A phone call on holidays if I felt like it, usually lasting about 10 minutes before the conversation turned to Bryce. A visit once a year, maybe, where I would sit in my childhood home feeling like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. They never seemed to notice or care about the distance. They never asked about my job, my life, my friends. They never visited Seattle, never saw my condo, never met anyone I dated. Everything changed about 2 years ago when I got a call from my mom. Bryce's kidney condition had finally progressed to the point where he needed a transplant. His remaining kidney was failing, and dialysis was only a temporary solution. The doctors said he needed a living donor for the best outcome, and family members were the most likely to be compatible matches. Now, I want to be clear about something. If my parents had called me up and asked, genuinely asked, if I would be willing to get tested to see if I was a match, I probably would have said yes. Despite everything, despite the years of neglect and favoritism, I'm not a monster. Bryce is still my brother. If I could help save his life, I would at least consider it. But that's not what happened. Instead, my mom called me in a panic, not to ask if I would get tested, but to inform me that I was already scheduled for testing at a transplant center near their home. She had given them my information, filled out preliminary paperwork on my behalf, and scheduled an appointment for the following week. She had used my old address, my social security number, that she apparently still had from when she used to do my taxes as a teenager, and had signed documents claiming to represent my interests. She spoke like this was already decided, like my participation was just a formality. "I knew you'd want to help your brother," she said, as if she was doing me a favor. "Family takes care of family. This is your duty as his brother. I went ahead and got everything set up so you wouldn't have to worry about the details." I sat there in stunned silence for a good 30 seconds. My duty? She had signed me up for invasive medical testing and potentially major surgery without even asking me first? Without so much as a, "Hey, would you be willing to consider this?" When I finally found my voice, I asked her to explain exactly what she had done. She got defensive immediately. "I just moved things along so we wouldn't waste time. Bryce doesn't have time to wait for you to think about it. He needs a kidney now, and you're the best chance he has. Did it occur to you to maybe ask me first?" I said. "Why would I need to ask? You're his brother. Of course you're going to help. This is what family does." That sentence told me everything I needed to know about how my parents viewed me. Not as a person with my own life, my own autonomy, my own right to make decisions about my own body. I was just a resource, a spare parts bin they could raid whenever Bryce needed something. I told her I needed time to think. She immediately got angry, said there was nothing to think about, said I was being selfish, said Bryce could die if I didn't do this. She cried about how she couldn't lose her baby boy. She yelled about how I was being ungrateful. She told me I was breaking her heart by even hesitating. I hung up. Over the next few days, my phone blew up. Mom calling repeatedly, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Dad calling with his let's be reasonable voice that really meant, do what your mother wants. He tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. Your mother was just trying to help, he said. She panicked. You know how she gets when it comes to Bryce. She signed me up for surgery without asking me, I said. That's not panic. That's entitlement. He got quiet after that. Even Bryce called. To his credit, he sounded uncomfortable. Look, I didn't ask them to do this, he said. I found out about the appointment the same time you did. They just told me it was handled. I didn't know they hadn't talked to you first. I told Bryce I would think about it. Then I sat down and really thought about my entire life. I made a decision that night that changed everything. The next morning, I called my boss and asked about transferring to our Austin office. We had been expanding there, and they were looking for senior developers. There was an opening, and they were happy to have me relocate. I gave my 2 weeks' notice at Seattle and started making arrangements to move. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I just quietly packed up my condo, sold what I couldn't take, arranged for movers, and prepared to disappear. Before I left, I did one more thing. I went through the process of legally changing my name, filed the paperwork, paid the fees, and officially became someone new. Not going to share my new name here for obvious reasons, but it felt like shedding a skin I had been wearing for 28 years. The day I left Seattle, I sent my parents one text message. I'm not coming to the appointment. I'm not getting tested. I'm not donating anything. Don't contact me again. Then I blocked their numbers, blocked their emails, blocked them on every social media platform. I was gone. The first few weeks in Austin were surreal. I kept expecting someone to show up at my door, but they couldn't find me. My new apartment was in my new name. My utilities, my phone, my bank accounts, everything was disconnected from my old identity. As far as my family was concerned, I had vanished. I found out later from my cousin what happened when my parents realized I was serious. My mom showed up at my Seattle condo only to find it empty. The doorman told her I had moved out weeks ago with no forwarding address. She stood in the parking lot crying while my dad called the police to report me missing. The cops told them there was nothing they could do. I was a grown adult who had explicitly told them not to contact me. I wasn't missing. I had chosen to leave. My mom didn't accept that. She called the police station 3 more times. She showed up in person and made a scene until they threatened to remove her. She filed a missing persons report that got rejected because I didn't meet the criteria. She called hospitals asking if anyone matching my description had been admitted. She even called the morgue, convinced I must have died because her precious oldest son would never abandon his family voluntarily. When all of that failed, she started calling everyone I had ever known. Derek got a call from her at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, asking if he knew where I was. He told her no and hung up. She called him back 3 more times that week. My college roommate got a call at his office in the middle of a meeting. Had to explain to his boss why some strange woman was calling his work number crying about her missing son. A girl I dated briefly 5 years ago got a Facebook message from my mom asking for any information about my whereabouts. My high school basketball coach got a letter in the mail asking him to help locate me. None of them knew anything. And even if they did, they wouldn't have told her. Most of them didn't even know my parents' names because I had stopped talking about my family years ago. My parents even drove to Seattle, 14 hours each way, and staked out my old office building for 3 days straight. They sat in their car in the parking lot from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., watching people come and go, hoping to catch me arriving or leaving. When that didn't work, they started approaching random employees walking to their cars, showing them photos of me from their phones, asking if anyone recognized me. One woman got so freaked out she called security. HR eventually sent a formal cease and desist letter threatening legal action if they didn't leave the premises immediately. My dad tried a different approach. He called the company's main line pretending to be a potential client. The receptionist said no one by that name worked there. He called back several more times with different stories. Eventually, they traced the calls and added his number to the block list too. Meanwhile, I was building a new life in Austin. The city agreed with me. I liked the heat, the sprawl, the way people minded their own business. I found an apartment complex where nobody asked questions, and the maintenance guy just nodded at me in the elevator. I made new friends at work, people who knew me only as the person I had chosen to become. Nobody asked about my family. Nobody expected me to fly home for holidays. Nobody wondered why I never mentioned parents or siblings. I got a promotion within 6 months, leading a small team working on a new product launch. My boss pulled me aside after the project shipped successfully and told me I was on track for director level if I kept it up. I started maxing out my 401k contributions. I built an emergency fund with 18 months of expenses. I bought furniture that I actually picked out myself instead of taking hand-me-downs. I painted my bedroom walls a color I liked. I joined a rock climbing gym near my apartment because I wanted to try something new. That's where I met Jenna. She was belaying for a friend when I walked in for my first lesson. We started talking. She was a nurse at one of the big hospitals downtown. She had a laugh that made me want to tell jokes just to hear it again. We got coffee after my lesson ended. Then dinner 2 days later. Then we were dating. After a few months together, I told Jenna the whole story. We were sitting on my couch, takeout containers on the coffee table, some movie playing in the background that neither of us was watching. I told her about the favoritism, the neglect, the spelling bee trophy nobody cared about, the championship game nobody attended. I told her about my mom signing me up for surgery without asking. I told her about the name change, the move, the blocking of all contact. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Your body is your body. Nobody gets to volunteer it for you, not even family, especially not family who never treated you like family in the first place." I knew right then I was going to marry this woman. About a year after I moved, my cousin reached out with an update. Bryce's condition had gotten worse. He was on dialysis full-time now, going to a center 3 times a week for 4-hour sessions. The wait for a cadaver kidney could be years. My parents were still desperately searching for me, convinced that if they could just find me, they could fix everything. 6 months ago, my cousin called again. "Your parents hired a search service," she said. "Some company that specializes in finding people who don't want to be found. They're getting desperate." "How much did they pay?" I asked, morbidly curious. "I heard your mom mention $5,000. Up front. $5,000 to track down a son they had ignored for 3 decades. $5,000 they never spent on a single birthday party for me. $5,000 they couldn't spare for summer camp or driving lessons or a graduation celebration, but they could find it real quick when they needed something from me." I thanked my cousin and went into high alert mode, locked down my social media completely, made all profiles private, changed my profile photos to something unrecognizable, removed any location data. I spent an entire weekend going through every People Finder website I could find, opting out of each one, sending removal requests, following up when they didn't comply. I made sure my address wasn't connected to my new name in any public records. I talked to my landlord about not confirming my residence to anyone who called asking. I even varied my routine, taking different routes to work, shopping at different grocery stores on different days. A few weeks later, the search service apparently hit a dead end. My cousin said my parents were livid. They demanded a refund. The company told them they had done everything they could, but I had covered my tracks too well. My mom reportedly screamed at them over the phone that they were incompetent frauds. The company sent a polite email explaining that some people simply did not want to be found, and there was nothing illegal about that. Then came the letter. It showed up at my office, sent to my company's general address with just my first name and a vague physical description. The mailroom guy brought it to my desk looking confused. "This you?" Some lady sent it with no actual address. "Just your first name? And tall, brown hair, works in tech." I opened it knowing exactly who it was from. 6 pages, handwritten on fancy cream-colored stationery, with little flowers in the corners, the kind of paper someone uses when they're trying to seem sincere. She talked about how much they missed me, how worried they were, how Bryce was getting sicker every day, and every day he didn't get a transplant was another day closer to losing him forever. She talked about when I was a baby, how she used to rock me to sleep while humming old songs, how I was such a good baby, hardly ever cried, always so easy. She didn't mention anything from after Bryce was born, nothing from my actual childhood that she had been present for, just baby stuff from before she had someone better to pay attention to. She included 3 photos of Bryce hooked up to dialysis machine. In one of them, he was looking directly at the camera with an expression that seemed posed. On the back, she had written, "Your brother needs you," in her loopy handwriting. Another photo showed him lying in a hospital bed. Another showed him in a wheelchair. I wondered if she had asked him to look extra sick for the photos, or if he had volunteered. What she didn't do was apologize. Not once in 6 pages did she acknowledge that what they had done was wrong. Not once did she take responsibility for signing me up without consent. The closest she came was one sentence buried on page 4. "I'm sorry you felt hurt by our eagerness to help Bryce." Classic manipulation. Not, "I'm sorry we hurt you." Just, "I'm sorry you felt hurt." making it my fault for having the wrong reaction to their action. I shredded the letter and threw it away. Things escalated from there. My mother started calling my office, having gotten the general number from a business directory. The receptionist was confused at first because no one there went by my old name. She transferred the call to me thinking it might be a client. It wasn't. My mom's voice came through the speaker, frantic and angry at the same time. "I know you work there," she said. "I know you're listening. You need to stop this nonsense and come home. Your brother is dying. How can you be so selfish?" I hung up without saying a word. She called back immediately. The receptionist answered again, and my mom started screaming at her, demanding to be connected to me, threatening to come to the office in person if they didn't put me through. Security had to get involved. HR called me into a meeting to figure out what was going on. I explained the situation as briefly as I could. Medical coercion, boundary violation, family estrangement. They were surprisingly understanding. Someone in HR had a similar situation with an estranged parent and knew exactly what I was dealing with. They put a block on calls from my parents' numbers and flagged my file so no information about me would be released to anyone claiming to be family. Then came the social media campaign. It started small. A post on my mom's personal Facebook about how worried she was about her missing son. Sad story about how I had just vanished one day with no explanation. No mention of why I might have left. No mention of the unauthorized medical appointment. Just a heartbroken mother desperate to find her boy. Her friends responded with support and prayers. A few offered to share the post to spread the word. She took them up on it. Then it grew. She started posting in community groups. "Have you seen my son?" Posts with old photos of me. Usually ones where I was standing next to Bryce so she could show what a close family we used to be. She posted in missing persons groups. In groups for her hometown. In groups for Seattle. In groups for random cities around the country, hoping I might have ended up there. She wrote long posts about how she didn't understand what she had done wrong. How she had given me everything a mother could give. How she had sacrificed so much for both her boys, and now one of them was dying while the other refused to help. She made herself the victim. She made me the villain. She rewrote history in real time, creating a narrative where I was the ungrateful monster who had abandoned a perfect, loving family for no reason. Some people bought it. The comment sections filled up with sympathy for her. People calling me heartless. People calling me a coward. People offering to help track me down. Strangers volunteering to be amateur detectives to hunt down a grown man who had clearly chosen to leave. One guy said he worked in IT and could probably trace my digital footprint if she gave him my old email addresses. She gave them to him. He spent 2 weeks trying and failed, but plenty of others saw through it. A few people who knew our family commented with the truth. One woman who had gone to high school with us posted a long comment about how I had always been treated like an afterthought. She mentioned the basketball game nobody attended. She mentioned seeing me at graduation standing by myself while everyone else had family around them. She said she wasn't surprised I had left and that my mom should look in the mirror if she wanted to understand why. My mom deleted that comment within minutes, but someone had already screenshot it and shared it to another thread. My cousin jumped in with more details, carefully avoiding anything that would reveal my location. She confirmed that my parents had tried to sign me up for surgery without consent. She confirmed that this was the final straw after decades of favoritism. Those comments got deleted too, but the screenshots kept spreading. People started questioning my mom's version of events. A few commenters pointed out that grown adults don't disappear for no reason, that maybe she should consider what she did to drive me away instead of trying to hunt me down. My mom responded by posting more sad stories, more childhood photos, more updates about Bryce's declining health, with the clear implication that I was killing him by not showing up to donate. She started a GoFundMe for Bryce's medical expenses and mentioned in the description that her other son had abandoned the family during their darkest hour. 3 months ago, Bryce himself managed to find me. I don't know exactly how he did it. Maybe he hired someone better than the service my parents used. Maybe he had access to different resources. Maybe he just got lucky or asked the right person the right question. But one evening I came home from work, and there he was, sitting on the concrete steps outside my apartment building, looking like he might fall over if a strong breeze hit him. He looked terrible, pale in a way that seemed almost gray, thin, like his body was consuming itself from the inside out. His clothes hung off him like they belonged to someone 2 sizes bigger. There were dark circles under his eyes and a yellow tinge to his skin that spoke to kidneys not doing their job. He was clearly worn down by years of dialysis, by the constant medical appointments, by the waiting and hoping and watching his body slowly fail. Part of me felt genuine sympathy. This was still my brother, whatever else had happened between us or because of us. Another part of me felt the wall go up immediately, expecting another attempt at manipulation, another guilt trip, Another demand dressed up as a request. Before you say anything, he started, holding up his hands in a gesture that looked like it took significant effort. I'm not here because Mom and Dad sent me. They don't know I found you. I'm not going to tell them where you are or what name you're using or anything else. That's not why I came. I stood there with my keys in my hand, apartment door 10 feet away, easily walkable past him if I chose to. Then why did you come? Because I needed to talk to you. Brother to brother. Not through letters or phone calls or social media posts, face to face. I considered just walking past him. Considered telling him to leave. Considered a lot of things in those few seconds. But something made me stop. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper. Maybe I just wanted to hear what he had to say after everything. 5 minutes, I said. Talk. He took a breath. I know what they did was wrong. Signing you up without asking. I told them not to do it that way. But they didn't listen. He paused. I'm dying. That's the reality. I've been on the transplant list for 2 years. I'm not here to guilt you. I just wanted to look you in the eye and say I'm sorry. For all of it. For how they treated you our whole lives. I saw it. You deserved better. And I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. He stood up slowly, wincing. If you're not willing to get tested, I understand. It's your body and your choice. He started walking toward a car at the curb. I watched him go. Bryce? I called out. He turned. I'll think about it. He nodded and left. I thought about it for weeks. Then I made a decision. I went to a transplant center in Austin, completely independent of my parents, and got the full workup done. Figured there was no point agonizing over whether to donate if I wasn't even a match. Results came back 2 weeks later. I'm not a match. Tissue compatibility issues. Even if I wanted to donate to Bryce, I couldn't. I told Bryce over video call. He took it better than expected. Honestly, I'm relieved, he said. Not because I don't need a kidney, but because now there's no pressure. We can just be brothers. Then Bryce told our parents. Not where I am or my new name. Just that he found me, we talked, and I'm not a match. According to Bryce, Mom lost it. Started screaming that I must have sabotaged the test. That I was trying to kill her baby boy on purpose. Dad sat there in silence. But here's the kicker. After Mom calmed down, she asked Bryce if I would be willing to at least donate some money for his medical bills, since I wasn't donating a kidney. Bryce told her no on my behalf. Mom started crying and said she didn't understand where she went wrong. 2 weeks later, Bryce called with news. He had been moved up on the transplant list. A compatible kidney from a deceased donor had become available. The donor was a young man, 24 years old, killed in a motorcycle accident 3 states away. Sad story, but his family had decided to donate his organs. Bryce was a match for the kidney. Surgery was scheduled for Tuesday morning, 6 days away. I sat with that information for a while, thought about whether I should do anything, whether I even could do anything. This was what Bryce had been waiting for. A shot at a normal life, a chance to stop going to dialysis 3 times a week, a chance to eat what he wanted and drink what he wanted, and not have to plan everything around medical appointments. And I realized I wanted to be there, not for my parents, not out of obligation, for Bryce. Because despite everything, despite all the years of being in his shadow, he had done something nobody else in our family had ever done. He had seen me. He had apologized. He had treated me like a person. I booked a flight. I didn't tell my parents I was coming. Bryce and I coordinated carefully. I would fly in Monday night, stay at a hotel near the hospital, and he would make sure our parents weren't around during the times I planned to visit. It felt ridiculous, having to sneak around to see my own brother, but that's what our family had come to. The flight landed at 9 p.m. I got a rental car and drove to the hotel, checking in under my new name just in case. Bryce texted me that he was already admitted, doing pre-op stuff, and that our parents had gone home for the night. I went to sleep early, knowing the next day would be long. Tuesday morning, I got to the hospital at 6 a.m. Bryce was already in pre-op. They let me see him for a few minutes before they took him back. He was hooked up to IVs, wearing one of those flimsy hospital gowns, looking nervous but also weirdly peaceful. Thanks for coming, he said. It means a lot. Don't die on the table, I said. I didn't fly all this way for a funeral. He laughed. No promises. They wheeled him away at 7 a.m. I went to the surgical waiting room, a beige space with uncomfortable chairs and a TV playing morning news on mute. I was the only one there for the first hour. Then other families started filtering in, waiting for their own people, their own surgery, their own outcomes. The surgery was supposed to take 4 to 6 hours. I sat there the whole time, phone in hand, checking for updates. The hospital had a system where they texted status reports. Patient in OR. Surgery underway. No complications. Surgeon closing. Each text made my shoulders drop a little more. Tension I didn't know I was holding starting to release. Around 1 p.m., the surgeon came out. a short woman with gray hair and tired eyes still in her scrubs. She found me in the waiting room, introduced herself, and said the surgery had gone well. The kidney was in place, already functioning, already producing urine. Bryce was in recovery, still under anesthesia but stable. I thanked her probably 4 times. She smiled like she was used to it. They moved Bryce to a regular room around 3 p.m. I went to see him. He looked like garbage, obviously. Fresh out of major surgery, pale and groggy, tubes and wires everywhere. But he was alive. His eyes opened when I walked in. "Hey," he said, his voice scratchy and weak. "Hey yourself. New kidney, who dis?" He tried to laugh and immediately regretted it. "Don't make me laugh. Everything hurts. That's what you get for letting them cut you open." I pulled a chair up next to his bed and sat down. We didn't say much. He drifted in and out of sleep. I scrolled through my phone, responded to work emails, let Jenna know everything had gone well. A few nurses came in to check his vitals, adjust his IV, look at the surgical site. Each one gave me a little nod like they understood why I was there. Around 6 p.m., Bryce woke up more fully. He was able to talk in complete sentences. The first thing he said was, "You stayed the whole time? Where else was I going to go? I don't know anyone in this city. You could have left. Nobody would have blamed you." "Yeah, well, I'm here." He looked at me for a long moment. "Thanks," he said. "Really." I stayed at the hospital until 9 p.m., then went back to my hotel. I returned early the next morning and repeated the process. Sat with Bryce, talked when he was awake, worked on my laptop when he wasn't. Made sure to check the parking lot before I left each night, scanning for my parents' car, ready to leave through a different exit if I saw it. I stayed in town for 3 days total, visiting Bryce during hours when I knew our parents wouldn't be there. He had their schedule memorized. Mom came in the mornings, Dad in the afternoon, both together in the evenings. I filled in the gaps. We talked more in those 3 days than we had in the previous 10 years combined. Real conversation, not surface-level small talk. He told me things I never knew, like how he always felt guilty about the way our parents treated me, how he tried to talk to them about it once when he was 16, how they shut him down immediately, told him he was imagining things, told him they loved us both equally and he should stop stirring up trouble. I believed them, he said. I wanted to believe them. It was easier than admitting my parents were capable of that kind of favoritism, so I just went along with it. And I'm sorry. "You were a kid," I said. "We were both kids." "Yeah, but I could have said something later, when we were adults." "I didn't. You're saying something now." On my last day, I was leaving the hospital around 8 p.m., heading for the parking garage when I ran into my mom. She froze. Then her face crumpled and she moved toward me with her arms out. "My baby, you came back." I held up my hand. "Stop." She stopped. "I came for Bryce, not for you." Bryce apologized. "You haven't." "I don't understand what I did wrong," she started. "I was just trying to save your brother. You signed me up for surgery without my consent. You spent 28 years treating me like I was invisible. You still haven't apologized. This conversation is over." I walked past her to my rental car. She called after me, crying, asking me to wait. I got in and drove away. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm back in Austin. Jenna picked me up from the airport. We got tacos on the way home. Life is normal. Life is good. Bryce is recovering well. We text regularly. He sent me a photo of himself walking around the hospital floor with his IV pole. Caption, "New kidney, who dis?" I sent back a thumbs up. My parents have tried reaching out since the parking garage. Mom sent another letter to my office, shorter this time. 1 page. Still no real apology. Dad tried calling Bryce's phone while I was there, hoping I would answer. I didn't. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.